Hi, this is Dan from Fisher Paykel Appliance Repairs. In this video I'm just going to be letting this Fisher Paykel Smart Drive washing machine run, and then as it runs we're going to talk about what it's doing at each stage, what basically the normal operation is, and what components are activating, etc. So if you have a problem at a certain point in your cycle, you can see from this what it's meant to be doing, and then that gives us an idea when we compare to a faulty machine what the fault is. If it's a pump that's not pumping out, or if it's a lid lock that's not locking, etc, etc. So this is quite helpful if you've got a fault that's not got a code coming up, or on some other machines, obviously knowing what's normal is going to be the only way you can diagnose. With the Fisher Paykel Smart Drives we have a lot of fault codes, so this is more helpful if you've got some little niggly problem, or if you've got a fault code that's not really making sense, because obviously the code is usually just it doesn't necessarily tell you exactly what the fault is, so this is going to hopefully give you more of an idea of what normal operation is. The washing machine we're testing it on is a 5.5 kg MW511, and I'm going to talk about, while it's filling up, I'll talk a little bit about what the MW versus GW means, that sort of stuff, just while we have it running, and I probably will end up fast forwarding through a lot of the stuff that's just waiting for it to get to the next stage, and talk about the transitions from one point to another. So the first thing happens when we power it on is it does that little self-check with the lights. If it doesn't power on in that first stage, then you've got a couple of things. It could be a fault 9, which is if you put another control board in and it hasn't been calibrated properly. Water valve faults are the most common ones, 48, 49, 50. If you've got a faulty valve, the valve will affect the machine and the boot up, because it's relying on those valves as part of the power supply. And so that's one of the few codes that will come up straight away. If you have a faulty rotor position sensor and you just move the bowl a little bit till it sends a bad signal at a particular position, then that will give you a code. Or if you have an EEPROM fault, is the other thing that will happen when it first powers on. We're now on standby. I'm just going to jump through to the last wash light. Every one of these lights is another 3 minutes of agitate. We're going to go cold, low water level, and hit start. Might help if I turn the water on as well. So you can see what was happening there was that the bowl started turning and the water valve opened. So in this case it's booted up okay, and it's happy with that, and so it's going straight to the fill. If we have any faults now, it's going to probably be related to that motor. So if you have a problem now, it could be related to the motor, or it could be related to water valves, but usually the water valves will either fail straight away or after they've heated up for a few minutes. If it's turning and not filling, then it could be like we had there where the water taps are turned off, or your filters could be blocked up, or you kind of do find that the valve will kind of get blocked up internally where it won't let water in, so it'll be activated and electrically okay, but physically not letting water in, and it's all a sealed plastic unit, so you have to buy a new water valve. Now, as I mentioned, this is a MW machine. The difference is between, so there's a GW 511. MW means it's the basic model, GW is the more advanced model, and then 5 obviously for 5.5 kg, and 11 it's a stage 11 washer. The GW model has got more options for the cycles. You've got better temperature control, so this one we can only select hot, warm, cold, and this one does not have a temperature sensor. So what it's doing is, if we set cold, it opens the cold valve. If we set warm, it'll mix the two, and if we set hot, it opens the hot valve. It can mix a bit of the cold into the hot and hot into the warm, so you can affect the, it's incorrect, that's on the GW machines. On these MW, you can change the warm cycle, whether it has both hot and cold valves on full bore, or whether it has one on and then pulses the other, because usually most people haven't got equal hot and cold pressure. So you want to have the hot on all the time, and if you just put the cold on all the time as well, the huge amount of cold water going in would overwhelm the hot. So you usually want to pulse the cold. I'll do another video later on about the optional adjustments, which includes how to change those settings. The water levels, we again have only 3 options, low, medium and high. So on the GW machine, so going back to the water temperatures, would have cold, cold, warm, 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 hot, and there's a temperature sensor to mix those values a lot better. And the optional adjustments, we actually select the temperature in degrees rather than just randomly pulsing the valves. The water levels, we've only got 3 options. On the GW would have intermediate steps as well. You could go low, low, medium, and then there'd also be an auto. How the auto is handled is that the machine fills to a certain level and then does a bowl check, which we're going to talk about shortly, and waits for it to float. On the later machines, so this is an 11, On the later machines, not the 12s, but on some of the, I think the 13s and then the ones with touchpads, what it does is it actually checks to the bowl floats and then extrapolates from there what water level it should run at. So it does kind of pulses along the way, whereas this machine's just turning constantly. On later models you'll see them do a little twitch as it's turning, and it's just trying to see if this bowl is floating, which we'll see shortly. If you've watched my other video talking about this clutch, you'll understand what I mean by the bowl floating, because when we go to agitate, we don't want this bowl turning with the agitator. So at some point it's going to fill with enough water to lift that bowl up. It probably almost is actually floating now. Yeah, it is. Okay, this is the bowl check. 2 pulses and a pause, and now it's gone to agitate. Now that bowl check is quite important. Go watch the other video I did a couple of videos ago talking about the clutch and the spline. If this bowl here hasn't floated up, if there's something in the clutch or the shaft that's making it bind, when the machine tries to agitate, it'll be turning this whole bowl, which is obviously not going to work. So that bowl check, it does a little pulse and it tries to see if the machine coasts. And it does a bowl check when it's finished filling and when it's finished draining, but it's checking for the opposite things. So when it's filled up, it does a bowl check, and when it pulses the motor around and stops, there should be no momentum because it's just turning the agitator. And so it sees no momentum, it does a pulse in each direction. If it wasn't happy, it would pause for a second, then keep doing a pulse in each direction, and it would do that several times. When it does the drain for the spin, you'll see that it does a pulse, but it looks for the bowl to coast on a little bit. As I said, on the later machines, as it's filling up, instead of turning in a constant direction, it will turn and then just do a little jerk. And the little jerk is, again, just checking to see if there's any momentum on the bowl. They're just doing it a lot more in line with the fill than what they did on these machines, the 11s and 12s. So we're now on an agitate. If we have any codes here, there's a few things it could be. Again, motor position sensors or something like that usually would come up earlier, but it could happen now. If we've got problems with siphoning, the drain hose end is too low and the water's siphoning out as it's filling, the water level could drop back down, and then there will be a water loss fault. Now in normal operation, there's air in the clothes that will kind of settle out as the clothes get wet, and so the machine will top up the water level if it drops, and I think, you check the service manual, it tops up 2 or 3 times, and any more than that it stops, because it doesn't know if that water's going out the drain or if it's just leaking out the bottom onto your floor, and doesn't want to be continuously topping up. It'll now wash for 3 minutes, every light we've got on there. We're going to advance it on to the next stage. Just trying to think, well, yeah, so I was talking about the water levels there, so you have the different steps. Here we've only got the 3. I've just filled to low for time. That drain pump sounds a bit noisy, doesn't it? We might have to fix that. If you want to know what I'm about to do now, I've got a video about that, if your drain pump's squeaking. I'll link to it. Just try that. Right, that sounds a bit better. So now the machine is at the drain stage for the first rinse. So we have 2 rinses and then a spin. The default setting for these is to do a deep rinse and a spray rinse. So a deep rinse is where it drains all the water out, spins very slowly, and then stops and fills itself back up again. That's getting ahead of me. It's the bowl check we talked about there. I'm just going to pause it for a second. The spray rinse is when it'll spin at a slow speed, and it'll speed up and slow down a bit and spray water in. And a spray rinse uses less water. Again, in the optional adjustments, you can choose whether you want to do 2 deep rinses, 2 spray rinses, or the default is 1 of each. So the water drained out, and when that did, this bowl dropped back down, and the clutch spline re-engaged. So now the bowl is locked to the agitator. So it does that bowl check again, but this time you'll notice it turns quite a lot further because you've got the whole momentum of the bowl dragging it on further. It once more does a check in each direction. Now this is quite commonly where these machines will stop because it won't sense properly. If you've got too much drag in your bearings, then the drag means it won't coast far enough. And if you have, perfect example. So this machine has got faulty bearings. Oh no, there we go, it was happy. So you should only usually do 1 pulse in each direction. That one did 2 or 3, and it has finally figured out that the bowl has engaged. It pauses and drains because there might be still a little bit of water in the bottom, and then it's going to start slowly turning, and it's going to want to lock the lid. So yeah, if you have that bowl check continually, you could have too much drag on your bearings, or you could have something stuck between the 2 bowls, or you could have a worn or faulty clutch spline. So when it starts, it's going to start turning very slowly, and then we're going to hear a click when it tries to lock the lid. So that was just a little stepping. Just waiting. So it's giving a click, and it's trying to see if it can lock the lid. And then if it can't lock the lid, it's going to start beeping at us and flashing the light. There we go. I'm now going to put the latch down, and it's now going to spin. This part's going to be slightly noisier on this machine. Probably wasn't a good example to use because it's got faulty bearings. Right, we are back. Through the magic of editing, we now have a GW612, or 611 I think, sorry, GW611 washer. It's going to be a bit quieter on the spin. So once again it's clicking for the lid lock. Lid is now locked, and so it's going to go into the spray rinse. So as I was starting to say before the other machine got too noisy, if it locks the lid, we've got the red light on to say that it's happily locked the lid, not flashing. If you've got problems after this, then usually it's to do with balance. So if the machine's not balanced properly, or usually if the suspension rods are worn out, it'll be very picky about how the load is balanced, something like that, or the other problems that cause out of balance, the holes in the bulb being blocked up, etc. But yeah, usually if you've got problems now, it'll be to do with the balance, because we've got drain pump running, got the motor running to spin. If the drain pump is starting to fail, you might find it drains most of the water out and then overheats and cuts out now. You might notice a bit of a burning smell. The pump will shut down towards the end of the spinning stage, so for the rinses it won't, but when we get to the main spin, you will hear the pump shut down. But then when it does its final slowdown, it'll start the pump up. Basically, as it starts to increase speed, so here's our spray. This is cold only. As it starts to increase speed, it starts spinning out more and more water. And then the last bit of the spin, not much water's coming out, so it just shuts the pump down. And then it will start it up just at the very end to pump whatever little bit of water's come out. So now we're doing the spray rinse, and it's going to speed up and slow down a little bit. Continue to spray cold water in there. It's cold only for the rinses. Even when it does a deep rinse, it fills up, it's cold only. If you swap your hot and cold taps around, and especially if you have the MW machine which isn't checking the water temperature, it can fill through the cold valve on your hot. Or if you've got it turned off, it could fill through the through the hot valve. If you've got cold to the hot, and you've got hot turned off but hot turned to the cold, you might find it works okay for the wash, but then it won't fill on the rinse. So the thing to always check with that is make sure your hot and cold aren't swapped around if you've got one tap turned off, because it will accept hot water for the wash, but not for the rinse. Even if you've selected a warm or a hot wash, the rinse is always cold. I'm just probably going to fast forward the next little bit here, so if you want to particularly watch what it's doing and compare it to your machine, ultimately by the time you got to the stage it's probably going to be alright, but if you want to watch that, then you can just reduce the speed down on your control to 50%, and you'll be able to watch it back in real time if you so want to do. Otherwise we're just going to let it run through the next spray rinse. At the end of this it's going to slow down and stop, and then it will start filling back up again for the deep rinse. Right, so now we're filling for the deep rinse. This is just a repeat of what we were doing before for the wash. The lid is unlocked. The cold only, as I mentioned, is going to be filling, and it's going to fill to whatever water level got selected. If you've got auto water level selected, it'll just fill to what it remembered from last time. It's then going to wash for a couple of minutes to help rinse any soap out, and then it's going to drain out and go back through and do the spin process again. So once again, we'll just let it run and fast forward. If you want to particularly watch, slow it down. Exactly the same things we talked about before. It's going to fill up, it's going to do a bowl check, it'll agitate, then drain, do a bowl check, start turning slowly, lock the lid, and then go into the spin. Except it's going to spin faster, and it's not going to step the speeds up and down and spray water through. The little pulsing of the drain pump you see here is actually totally normal. What it is that they found that they sometimes had problems with fluff catching around the pump impeller. So they run the pump and then suddenly stop it and start it again. Just stop it for half a second and start it again. The idea is when you suddenly stop the pump, the water flow with momentum keeps on going. Any fluff or lint that's starting to collect around the pump impeller will get washed on with the water, and then when it starts up again, it hopefully will have carried on further down the drain. So it usually only happens on the spin drain on those machines, not during the rinse. Sometimes if the whole machine stops and pauses in that way, like when it's filling or turning the motor, it could be another fault causing the machine to restart. But while the drain is happening, this is normal behavior. Alright, there we go, the wash is finished, lid is unlocked, and the machine is done. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to put them in the comments box down below. I do try and check up and answer any questions every couple of days. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.